Hello, welcome everyone. We are so excited to have you join in. I'm so glad that everyone has been saying hello in the chat. It's good to see who is here. My name is Danielle. I'm the CEO of Women Talk Design, and thanks again for joining us today. For those of you who are new to Women Talk Design, just a quick little bit about us. We are on a larger mission to see a more diverse group of speakers on stage. So we work really closely to elevate the voices of women and non-binary folks all throughout their speaking careers, to inspire more folks to start speaking, to help equip them with the tools to become more confident speakers, and give them opportunities to practice. And I personally am very thrilled for today's session because we have our founder, Christina Woodkey, who is going to be leading us through better online teaching. And we, as we all know, are all moved to remote quite suddenly. And Christina has spent many of the past years teaching in all different types of contexts. So a bit about her, for those of you who don't know the incredible Christina. She started her career back in information architecture, has worked in the past 25 years in the design and tech space, moving as a designer, product manager, general manager, entrepreneur, author, speaker, you name it. She started teaching at General Assembly, and that's how her and I first met about 10 years ago almost, and then has since taught at the California College for the Arts and is now teaching at Stanford as a lecturer in the HCI department. And so she has been working endlessly over the past couple of months to move her classes online and is joining us today to share everything that she's learned from all of that research. And one of the things about Christina is that when she wants to learn about something, she dives deep. So she has been doing her research, working around the clock, and I'm so excited to hear what she has to share with us today. A couple of just some logistics. I'm so glad to see you all are chatting in the chat. If you change the to all panelists and attendees, then everyone will be able to see what you say. Otherwise, it'll just go to Christina and I, and we'd love for you to keep the conversation going in there. I also encourage you to ask questions. So we'll leave some time for Q&A at the end. You can use the Q&A feature on the webinar if you haven't done that already. You can post your questions in there. I'll also keep an eye on the chat, and then at the end of Christina's presentation, we will ask her those questions and try to get all of those answered. We're also recording this webinar, and we'll send it out to all of you afterwards. So thanks so much, everyone. It looks like Christina might have had some quick technical difficulties. I see that she dropped off here. So, oh, and there she's back. Perfect timing. Christina, are you with us?
Timing, that's amazing, because I will tell you, I think I'm probably going to go down again, but I've now got a hotspot up, so I may switch networks magically, but I'll use this one as long as it lasts.
Awesome.
Unless you want to take one more second while I just...
Yeah, whatever you need to do. If you want to take another second, that's okay. As I said, if you haven't said hello already, we'd love for you to say hello in the chat. Something else I thought of actually as Christina's getting set up, we will have a feedback survey that we'll be sending out after this event. So we'd love to hear from you in all of our events. We always send out our feedback, and it helps us to improve in everything we do. So thanks so much. Christina, how's it going over there? This is one of the things to prepare for with remote teaching. Internet could go down, things can go wrong. I know Christina has, I think, 3 different internet connections, so I'm sure she's playing between them. Oh, and she's down again. Okay, awesome. Well, in the meantime, oh, here she is.
Are we back?
You're back.
Yeah.
Perfect timing. I think they're tired of hearing from me, so I'm going to spotlight your video and let you take it away.
Okay, awesome. Because unfortunately, welcome to Teaching Online. We couldn't get a better example. And what's the definition of irony? My life. So welcome to Suddenly Remote. I'm sure Danielle's explained everything. So I love what she does while the music's playing, is getting everybody to say hi. It really forces you to open up chat, which is a good first practice. Sometimes we assume people know Zoom better than they actually do. So it's really great to help people find the tools they need, especially with Zoom, where you actually have to hover to get the tools to appear. So if you hover at the bottom of your screen, you can see that you have some tools. You can raise your hand. Danielle is going to be my partner here. She's going to ask me questions, and that way I can just focus on really helping y'all. So this has been a shock to my system, I'll be quite honest. Some of you probably do remote a while, but I have always sworn not to do remote for so many reasons. And that was not really a choice at the beginning of this quarter. So I had two brand new classes, neither of which were fully designed. And I had 2 weeks to get them designed. And then I had to also teach myself what online remote is. And I'm really grateful to Stanford because, oh my gosh, there's so much knowledge there. And every single day over what would have been my spring break, we had like 3 or 4 webinars a day that you could crash in to help learn how to do this. And I was taking notes the whole time. And I thought it'd be really useful to be able to share that knowledge out with other people. Hopefully we can help them as well. We have students in Europe, here, Asia, all over the United States with a wide range of bandwidth, equipment, and supplies. It was a really, really difficult transition. And I know some of you are teachers and took the teacher rate, and some of you are professional workshop people. And it's gonna be a little bit different for everybody, but a lot of the core ideas are still super, super, super relevant. So the way I did it was the way I do everything. If you've seen one of my talks before, you know I'm a big fan of short feedback cycles. The worst thing you can possibly do is design something and then check in at the end to find out, how did I do? That is a recipe for disaster. What you want to do is learn what you're doing wrong as early as humanly possible. So in my case, I did weekly exit tickets to create short feedback cycles that allowed us to tune the class. And I will say that those exit tickets taught me more than any of the Stanford webinars. I was able to nail problems weeks before they put together a webinar to explain how to fix it. We made a bunch of changes, which I'll go over some of these, but one of the big shockers was I really had to reduce the workload. It's so hard to learn remote. I was really shocked by this. We needed a super predictable rhythm. We needed one channel to be the source of truth. Unfortunately, email is the tragedy of the commons. And everybody thinks they're being super helpful by sending you like a daily email and just a check-in email. And if every single teacher is doing that to a student, they just die under the notice. So we had one place where you could turn off all your notifications and know that you could find out what was going on there. And if you think about it, this is what we live in right now with our emails. If you think everybody's trying to, everybody's buried in information, how do you make sure that students, whether they be corporate or otherwise, can find the information they need? In fact, turning off notifications turned out to be the #1 thing that made my students happy anyway. So there's that. And then a week overview. So this is how the talk's going to be pretty much set up. I'm going to talk about one aspect in particular of good teaching that proved to be useful for every single thing I did otherwise. It was the thing I leaned back into over and over again. I'm going to talk about low talk teaching, which there's no name for it, but it's, I guess some people call it flipped classroom, but it's really not about me talking like I'm doing now, but really much more about getting the students to engage with learning. I want to talk about the planned online courses. So there's a big difference between saying, oh, we're the continuing ed and we're going to do a 12-week planned class, or you all are going to say, oh, we're going to design this workshop or this series for online, versus going, uh-oh, the world's collapsing. I still need the money. People still need the knowledge. How am I going to quickly flip this over into something that will work? And I think it's not just schools that are struggling with this, but people who are suddenly trying to get their conferences or their corporate workshops online. And of course, I'm going to talk about tech. When I teach drawing, everybody wants to know what pencil I use. It's the same thing here. Everybody wants to know about tech. So we'll give a little bit of time for that at the end. So I think I've got my notes and everything up, but you know what? I don't care. I kind of like it, actually. Danielle has showed me this clever trick to show how screen share just a portion. And what you can do is go into Advanced tab, and then you can show a part of it, but I'm going to actually leave this up. My CAs kept presenting in edit mode, and first I thought, well, that's kind of lame. And then I realized it was hugely valuable because I can quickly jump around the slides. I can even leave little notes down here in the note field, which students maybe can reference to. So it's not the end of the world to show everything, but if you wanted to, I'm going to stop my share. I'm going to redo my share. I'm going to go to advanced portion of the screen. And now it looks like I'm still in edit mode, but you can't tell. So learning goals and assessment. When I heard about this, I was like, oh, I got this, baby. These are OKRs. I know this. And unsurprisingly, I find it incredibly useful and important. So in traditional design of classes, it tends to be very teacher centric. Like, you've been asked to do a workshop, right? What's the first thing you're going to do? Well, you're going to go, oh, I know things. They want me to teach a workshop because I know things. So therefore, I'm going to think of all the things I know, and I'm going to design it into a lecture. And then maybe I'm going to consider assessment. In school, we kind of have to. So like throw in a midterm and throw in an end of term. But then we maybe have, okay, what did I teach them? And uh, did it work? Well, I think we have to make this user-centered or student-centered. And for those of you with the UX background, you definitely know what I'm talking about. The planning really begins with the student. And we want to ask, how is this person changed? What new capabilities does the student manage to achieve? And that becomes our learning goal. And then you can break them up into little objectives, which are the pathways to get to the end of the goal. Okay, by the end of this week, they can do this. By the end of that week, they can do that. And then how do I know? How do I know if I'm achieving this goal or not? Classic, same as key results, right? How do I know that I'm succeeding? And then rather than lecture, we might want to think about an activity. Sometimes you do need a lecture, but often it's better to have people actually work with knowledge. And then as we think about this activity, what do they need to know to accomplish this activity? And that's really important. Danielle, any questions so far that are urgent?
Yeah, Nitya asked if the setting that you had showed with the partial screen share is just in PowerPoint or also in Google Slides.
It's actually a Zoom feature. It's not a slide feature. So when you open Zoom, on the first page, you have screen share. But if you notice, there's like a little tabby, it's design, but it says advanced. If you click on advanced, it'll say share partial screen. And so what happened is I shared my whole screen, and then I closed it out, and then I launched screen share, went to advanced, and clicked show partial. And it's a little like taking a screenshot. I can kind of drag it around to show how much of my screen I want to show. So it works pretty well, I think.
Thanks, Christina. We have some more questions, but I'll save those till the end. So carry on.
Save them for the right moment. We'll have moments. Okay. I definitely like people to be able to ask if there's questions that are super relevant. And so here's the question I ask myself. After my course, students can, and I'll know this because, so we're going to practice writing a learning goal right quick, and we're going to use chat for that. But I want you to think about, after this course, students will be able to, and we're going to take something from Bloom's taxonomy. This is a pedagogical education model from a dude named Bloom that was then updated around 2001. And it's this idea that, you know, we want to move upwards from remember to understand, to being able to apply it, to analyze it, to evaluate it, create it. And we've got a ton of verbs we could use. And I've noticed that when people first make their first learning goals, there's a tendency to say, students will understand this. And so being able to have more granular terms like summarize, compare, contrast, sometimes can help get you to something that's a little more actionable, because these learning goals are going to guide you as you try to figure out what am I actually going to teach? What sort of activities am I going to design? So in the chat, I would love you, if I can ever find chat, I would love you to try practicing your learning goals. So try writing a learning goal right now in the chat. I'm going to give you some verbs right now that you can play with. Oops. I think I just gave them to only Danielle. There we go. That's a great one. Be able to explain to somebody else. Best way to understand something is to be a teacher. Ah, classify. That's a great verb. Okay, the 3 levels of listenings or client meetings. I want to take that class. Ah, great stories. They're rolling in like crazy now. After this course, students will be able to sketch their thoughts. What I love about this is it's a very objective, OKR-like objective, very visionary. And when we get into assessment, we can kind of dig into what that means. You can also do it by doing the breakdown of what do they know at hour 1, hour 2, or day 1, day 2. Ha, great. Okay. Well, I'm seeing a lot of signs that y'all are crushing it. So now we're going to get to the KR part of the OKR-ish learning goals and assessments. Let's think about how we can assess. Look, in a normal workshop, let's say you're doing one of those classic 1 days before a conference, you're going to walk around and you're going to eavesdrop on people. I do this a lot in my classes with my students, is I walk around and listen to what they're talking about and listen to see if they're confused. Classic assessments involve tests, involve quizzes. I'd like you to think now, what are some good ways that I can tell if students are confused, if they remember the key information, if they can act on the information? So take a second to really think about what's a good assessment for what I'm trying to do. KWL, I don't know that cool acronym. They ask questions. Yep, a good question is a form of critique. No question, questions are awesome. I find also that if students ask question, I've created psychological safety in the classroom as well, which I do by not wearing shoes and misspelling things on whiteboards. Basic checks for understanding, like fist of 5, which what they're making, yeah. Exactly. I'm doing it right now, right? I'm watching the chat and I can tell from the chat whether or not you understand what I talk about as an assessment. How's that for meta? So just like OKRs, these take a little practice and you got to kind of dig in, but it's well worth it because this is how you can find out if you're not being understood and before people get angry and ask for their money back, hopefully. Okay, I'm going to go a little bit into some overall advice. Not sure what's happening. Oh, okay. I'll look at that later, Darren. Thank you. So my advice is learning goals are vital. For me, they're the thing I go back to. I write them literally on a Post-it note, which I put right next to my monitor, and then I can remember, what am I trying to do? When I get caught up in all the bits and pieces and is the internet working and do I set up a hotspot? The learning goals are my touch base. They work very, very well. So you want to be thinking always about how is the student competency changed, right? What are they capable of? And you even want to mark it out across time. How are they good at the end of week 1, week 2, week 3? Danielle and I were going to teach a 1-day public speaking essentials course, and we ended up splitting it for 2 hours across 4 weeks. And so it's really about our ability to know, okay, have they successfully understood the first part so that they can move on to the next part? Who's falling behind? Who do we need to lend a hand to? Who do we need to play catch up with? And those assessments are really a tool, not to see if people are listening to you, but it's really a tool to find out who needs help, who's confused, who's lost. Ask yourself, how do they practice to get a hang of it? And then ask, what do they have to know to do it? What information? So for me, I just had to pick something from Bloom's taxonomy because it was a great visualization of the kind of language I want you to use, and therefore you have something to model on. So low talk teaching. Believe it or not, I really hate lecturing. My students are like, why? We just want to listen to you talk. But the problem is lecturing makes them feel like they're learning something, and lecturing makes me feel all special and like a wonderful butterfly and does great things for my ego. But it's not how we create true retention. And my goal in teaching is always attention. Can I get them to pay attention to me at all? Comprehension, do they actually understand what I'm teaching? And retention. I want them back when they're off getting their jobs at Google and Facebook and Intuit, will they actually remember the core concepts that I taught? And I just don't see why I would waste my time if people don't really comprehend and retain this information. I mean, my gosh, that's edutainment. That's not true teaching. So we're really going to struggle with attention spans. Probably right about now, y'all are probably sort of starting to wander off, maybe not all of you. It's really hard with remote because people have their entire awesome house. Look at all these books I could be reading instead of listening to someone. As well, you're learning on that damn machine that also gives you Facebook and Twitter and gossip and all that fabulous stuff. So you really have to think about, how can I keep people engaged enough so that they can learn? Arguably, and the data is all over the place on this, people will pay attention for about 20 minutes in a live situation. That's why TED Talks are 18 minutes. And it goes down to 7 minutes online. So we're going to have to go to war to get people to pay attention. And what I want to do is stretch attention spans. So I have a couple strategies for that. Mixing information with stories, etc. Questions, a good question is a gift. Exercises like think, pair, share. And I'm going to keep going. I'm going to go into all of these in a little more detail, but people can get worn out from exercise exhaustion on top of Zoom exhaustion. So you need to think about pacing. How often are people leaning forward and actually doing something? And how often are people leaning back and reflecting and being contemplative? And variety really is the spice of online life. So even if I'm only talking, I'm like, wait a second, I can totally listen to Robert Sapolsky talk for 90 minutes. I was really shocked. I went back to his lectures again for admittedly the third time. He's this amazing biologist at Stanford that I just love listening to everything he says and writes. And I realize, the reason I can listen is he actually makes the content vary. It's interesting. So he might, give us a theory, but then he might also tell us a little story about the baboon tribes that he follows. And then he might give us a sexy number about how much of a percentage genes do we share with these bamboos. And by moving around from theory to the details of the savannah over to good hard science, your brain gets excited, your brain is being activated, your brain is actually starting to build a concept map, and you are actively listening, even if you're not actually taking notes. And so the variety you get in your content can really make a difference in people's ability to pay attention. It also has the secondary effect of increasing comprehension. So have you ever been in that situation where somebody's saying, oh, we should do this, this, and this, and you're like, can you give me an example? Well, that's what your stories are doing. You're saying, I think we should change the way we teach online because it doesn't work. And people are like, what? It doesn't work? Give me an example of how it's failing us. So you can just set that up already. You have an idea, create a very beautiful, colorful visual. And by that, I mean with words, not necessarily drawings. And then close your argument with a nice fact. I love questions. Questions are the best part of critique. In fact, I've often had my students do critique with only asking questions because questions are so potent and they're so fabulous. You might say to yourself, I've only got a 20-minute talk. How can I do an exercise? Well, you could ask a really interesting question to ponder. I've done things where I have mini versions of my talks where I just say, think of the worst team you ever had. Close your eyes, visualize it. What made it so terrible? And then I have to count for my pause because time moves weirdly when you're the talker. So I'll be like, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 5 Mississippi. Wow, that's a lot of Mississippis. And then I'll go back into into talking. But giving people a little space to take your idea and put it inside them and work with it is really, really a great way to keep people intrigued. Never ask a question you know the answer to. I had a senior professor tell me that once, and it took me like a year to stop saying, oh, what was the first successful Silicon Valley startup? That's a question that has a single answer. Instead, you want to ask really complicated questions that may have multiple answers and more than one could be right. It should be worth contemplating. We call them juicy questions. I'm teaching the history and ethics of design right now at Stanford. And so we're always looking for a question you could actually discuss for 20 minutes and really have a proper argument about it. I think these are both from my CAs and students. And design for mass production means lowered cost and increased equity of consumption. So anybody can buy something nice. Is this benefit overshadowed by the tremendous waste produced in mass consumption? Dang, I can think about that for a long time. What happens when people can no longer get cheap goods? You know, it used to be that you could only have like one teddy bear. Is that a bad thing, a good thing? Do we really need 20 Beanie Babies? These are juicy, juicy, juicy questions. And the juicy question really is more powerful to get people to internalize the knowledge and make it part of their concept models. I love breakout rooms. I was in a meeting recently where somebody said, they don't work. Well, they are very hard to use, and they really can be your best friend. They take longer than you think. I've noticed, I've been timing it, that from the main room into the breakout room, it takes about 2 full minutes to be able to get your feet under you, to see everybody who's there, that everybody gets through their bandwidth to get there, that you can start introducing yourself and reorient from sitting back and listening to acting. So you just can't have a breakout room that is much shorter than 8 minutes and expect anything to happen. So if you normally would have a quick 3-minute talks amongst yourselves in a workshop, you really need to at least double that or more. However, people like to talk to each other. I would love for you to be able to talk to each other here, but we decided because of bandwidth and Zoom bombing reasons, we'd do a webinar. That's where I would lean more on questions than a breakout room. But it really helps to give people a scaffold. So we will pass out the slides before class so that people can look up the questions and refer back to them and refer back to the instructions. You can also do that by placing it in chat. Make sure people know how to ask for help, know that they can bounce back to the main room and then go back to their breakout room. It won't break everything. And quietly check in. So I've noticed that as the professor, you know, if I show up suddenly a breakout room, everybody's like, "Whoa, what's going on?" They stop talking. So I try to turn off my video, and when I pop in, if I hear a quick pause, I'll say, "Just checking in, anybody need help?" And if they say, "No, we're good," I'll leave. You kind of have to trust people to know what they're talking about. And you still need to check in case they do need help. And also, if your cat jumps on your lap, display him to your people. It's always everybody's favorite part when the animals and little children show up. I'm so against the Times rule, which is lock yourself in a silent closet and teach as if you were in your office. I mean, let's be humans for once, right? And I've never had a been on Zoom without the damn cat showing up, so got to get used to him. So there's a really cool concept that I like that I think I got from Dave Gray, which is head, heart, hands. And it's a way of thinking about helping people learn and understand. They need the intellectual, they need the emotional, and they need to do something with it. And I think as you design for online, you're going to want to start with the heart. And I think we get in this mode where we're teachers and we're like super logical and we're going to give you all this knowledge. I'm going to drop some knowledge on you. But I think that to prepare people for the knowledge drop, you want to inspire them. I mean, this change to online has really, really shown us at Stanford what Stanford's value is in providing on-campus support. Suddenly these students who don't have to worry about whether or not they're going to have a meal, whether or not they're going to have a place to sleep, whether or not they're going to have a place to study. We have a lot of scholarships, etc. All of a sudden they're really struggling to be able to keep up with their classes. And so I think it's absolutely critical for us to find a way to make learning available to everybody and not punish them just because they are in a less, a harder to use place to learn. We want them to be inspired, and then they want them to practice these skills they've learned. The thing is that inspiration will lead us. So I'm talking about all these things that are actually a lot of work. Getting your breakout room is going to be a lot of work. Figuring out how to change how you teach and not lecture for 4 hours in a row is going to be work. But I hope the inspiration of helping more people get better and learn will keep you going through it, just as it does for my students. And then once people are all inspired and they're ready to start making some stuff, I can then say, so here's something you should probably know, so this will be successful. And so I think the heart, hand, head approach is correct. So I'd love you to open your chat again. And I'd love you to talk about anything cool that you've seen people do that's really effective and gets people more engaged, more interested, stretches the attention spans. I agree, this font is charming. I'd have to look it up real quick. Sagona Extra Light. Very good. Playing music at the start of Zoom call. Cold calling participants. Oh, Rich, I'd have to know more about how that works. Humor is great. Yeah, a little variable, a little video, a little animation. An icebreaker that actually has a point. Thank you, C. Todd. I hate those icebreakers that have nothing to do with the main activity, but when they warm you up to the ideas, they're so good. Note-taking document. I just did this today. We actually had all the students rewrite history. That was fun. I don't know what Mentimeter is, but I so want to find out. Cool. Super awesome. Looks like things are slowing down a little bit. I like show a video and stop it. I'm going to steal that. So cool. Okay. So if you want to keep throwing them in the chat, that's super great. We're going to collect the chat for sure. I don't want to offer Danielle's work to send it to everybody, but I bet we could pull the highlights out. So my advice is don't do an all-day workshop. Asking somebody to sit on Zoom all day long that's a big ask. It's a big ask for attention, exhaustion, for your bodies. It's not like when you're all day in a room and you get up and you run around and you put Post-it notes on the wall or whatever all you do. You're just locking people into a little tiny chair and making them sit still. Even if we are doing things like asking provoking questions or putting things into the chat. Inspire people. Let them know why this matters. Why does this make a difference? Change up your delivery approach. Give lots of breaks and think heart, hands. I like that. That's a mistake, but I kind of love it. It should be heart, hands, head, but still. Okay. Always have water. By the way, this is my biggest piece of advice to y'all. Admire the large pitcher of water. Staying hydrated matters. Okay, I want to talk about planned remote now. Okay, so this is your remote course. People sign up for it. They know what they're walking into. They actually know that they're expecting to be online. They chose it basically. And so we have a lot of assumptions going into that. And all of you, I know there's a ton of lean startup people here. So hey tribe. But the assumptions are dangerous. And the assumption we usually have with planned remote is that they signed up for it, so they know what they're going into. We feel that we can assume they have enough bandwidth. We assume that they have the technology they need, that they're passionate about the subject. But we still have problems like Zoom fatigue. Google it if you haven't seen it. Apparently people are just worn out and exhausted after a day of Zoom. And a lot of that has to do with that as humans, when we know there are other people out there, we just work really hard to get the feedback, but it's so hard to get that feedback cycle when we're not in person that we get exhausted trying to know whether or not anybody's listening. There are surprise outages. I just proved it today and I didn't even plan it. And it's harder to understand and retain knowledge. So I've been saying lately that teaching online is like running on the beach, the high part. You're like, why is this so hard? I'm just running. Why is everything take so long? And it just is a harder lift for you as a teacher. I found that I need to add 1.5 to 2 times as much time to anything I do. It takes me twice as long to design the course because I have to think of all the other issues. I can't just wing it as much as I'd like to. The students take twice as long. It takes them longer to get into the breakout rooms. It takes them longer to warm up and start talking. It takes them longer to report back in Zoom. Everything is just a little bit harder. It is running on the beach. You got to get comfortable repeating yourself. Something that you might have covered completely and in depth last week, students are going to struggle to retain it. So again, make repeat yourself, and you could just literally repeat yourself. My old boss used to say, when you're tired of saying it, people are starting to hear it, Jeff Weiner. But you can also repeat yourself but in different ways. You can say it as a statement, you can say it supported by facts, you can say it hidden in a story. There's a lot of ways to repeat yourself without being tiresome, unless you do want to be tiresome, and sometimes that's the right choice. You gotta mom it when you gotta mom it. Multiple channels of information, pictures, etc., and reduce notifications. God, I hate notifications. So Zoom has been challenging. You can imagine all the curse words I almost put in there. It's just too unpredictable. I cannot believe how hard it is to use a tool where you can't figure out what's going to work from moment to moment. It works differently for different people, which I assume is connected to their platform probably, whether you're PC or Mac. They finally fixed the clickable URLs. Sometimes you can't copy the information in the chat. It's just ridiculous. We've taken the habit of putting a URL shortener so people can follow along in our classes. We didn't do this, but we will send out the slides at the end of this. Sometimes students couldn't get on Zoom at all. And you know, it's funny, you think, well, they signed up for it, surely they have enough of bandwidth. But I've heard stories of like, all of a sudden I don't have connectivity and I see a Comcast guy down the street. So apparently things can break. It's amazing all the different ways things can break. I like presenting in edit mode. Danielle's trick makes me look professional while I still get to click on all the slides, which is great. Zoom has a tendency to take everything over, which is also annoying. Breakout rooms, I've talked about it already. The only thing I didn't say about it that I think is quite important is never teach online alone. As you can see, I'm teaching with Danielle. 2 is the minimum I would ever teach anything with. What's really great is when things go sideways for me, she can vamp, she can chat, she can ask questions, she can teach people things. 3 is my favorite size to teach with. I really love having 3 people, but I'm old school web. I'm the person who still has the Control-S twitch when I'm writing. I'm paranoid, and paranoid has served me well in the time of Zoom. This is Danielle's trick. So when you get the slides, if you want to look at it, but as you can see, advanced, you can see do the portion of the screen. And this is how it looks right now for me while I'm presenting. I can see the little green lines, so that's what you're seeing, but I can still see all the juicy stuff around it, including my notes. A lot of people flip out because they can't stand looking at themselves. So what I like to recommend to people is just take a moment to make sure that the part of you that is showing is lovely and, you know, organized as best you can, and then hide your self view. I leave my self view on right now because the cat has a tendency to, he's shedding and he leaves behind these giant clouds of cat fur. And I don't want to be sitting there trying to like get the fur off my face while I'm talking to you, because that could be distracting. So it's a way of reminding myself, don't go after the face thing, but I could hide myself from myself. And that sometimes will relax you. But first, after you've done your little primp and prompt, and you don't have to wear pants, so that's awesome. You know, there's always a plus to it. Finally, unplanned remote. Oh my God. This has been hard. This has been very, very, very difficult and very challenging. There's been a lot of people talking about how we should use this as a great experiment to learn a lot more about teaching online. But as Mehran Samdi, who's the head of educational affairs at Stanford's computer science department, says, this is not remote teaching. This is emergency teaching. And we have to respect that emergency teaching changes things. So I found this wonderful set of norms, and it kind of reminds all the teachers, the course assistants, the students, that we have to start with compassion. I mean, nobody wanted to be doing this. You know, I would much rather be teaching this live in a room with you folks. It's very sad that I'm talking to nothingness right now. But as long as we can be as humane as possible, it's okay. And we can't expect to do the same thing online. I can't tell you how many professors and professionals just go, okay, well, all I do is talk to people, so I guess I can just go online and talk at people. And it barely worked live, and it definitely doesn't work online. The important thing is we foster this connection any way we can. So I think setting those intentions is a message that the students get. That means this is going to be a safe place, that we're all going to mess up, that it's going to be forgiven, that we're going to take care of each other. And we have reshown these norms throughout. Okay, I have a shocking piece of news for y'all. People have bodies. Nobody planned for what being on a screen all day long was going to do to people, despite the fact that we know it from being in tech forever. The reports of massive headaches is mind-blowing. I'm enjoying my new blue light reducing reading glasses. The science is very weak on it, but I have high hopes. Lynn says, ugh, dry and sore eyes. Yes, gosh. Backaches. After this, I'm gonna have to go lay on the floor and do a bunch of exercises because my back is going. Zoom butt, yeah. Carpal tunnel syndrome. Guess what? These are almost only decorative at this point. You know, we just aren't paid to be online all day long. And when we were doing online courses before, it was fine because, you know, people were like, oh, you know, I'm not normally online all the time, but I can do it a little extra. Now it's a grind. So we got to take care of each other. People have lives. People get sick. Danielle and I were doing our workshop, right? Our 4-day workshop. And somebody left and Danielle's like, is it okay? Did we piss them off? Did something go wrong? And they were really loving it. They were excited by it, but it just was a matter where they had a family crisis. And right now we have more family crises per minute than we ever have, right? Interruptions. The cat's gonna come sit on my lap. I was in a meeting the other day and this woman has 2 boys. One is 4 and one is 6. And the 4-year-old was up forcing her to drink. He was basically feeding her. Well, the 6-year-old was laughing behind her. And I was like, you know what? I dig it. You know, it's a nice reminder that we're not going to fake that we're more professional than we are. We're just going to be people together. So compassion, compassion, compassion. I mentioned this before, but notification fatigue is a thing. I mean, we all knew it was coming, right? We all knew there were too many emails. We all knew there were too many Slack messages, but all of a sudden everything's tripled because everybody just wants to make sure you're okay and everybody wants to make sure you're getting the information. I can't tell you how many emails my daughter is getting from her teachers that are like 90% marshmallow fluff and 1% the thing she actually has to do. I don't know what the other 99% is, but vaguely useful maybe. But what we found is by taking all this information and chunking it and putting it in one checklist and having it in one place and sending out one email that says everything is up and putting a subject line that was clear, saying this week's projects. Say less, say it less often, and say it completely in a place that students can find it again. And it's the same thing with your upcoming course. You might be like reminding people, okay, day 1, we're almost there, getting there. Instead, try to resist that urge, and especially during the class. So time zones. This is probably one of the biggest struggles for higher education. So what happens is we had all the students in the same place, so synchronous class was not a problem. But all of a sudden, I've got students in Australia, Bangkok, India, Italy, Germany, and they're all awake at different times. Some of the other educators have chosen to require students to come, but what I did instead is I have 3 sections a day, one in the early morning, one midday, and one late evening, and that way, students can come to whatever one they can make. It also helps with the family emergency problem. Now, I think if you're designing a course, that may be harder to do, but you can probably figure it out by asking, and by course, I mean like a corporate training course, I apologize. But you can talk to the folks who are setting you up with the corporate training and try to find out where people are and what are the best times to be able to reach out to folks. Be accessible. This is really important. It's really nice when you have a planned online situation where you have a good sense of who's going to be there and can they turn on the captions, etc. But it's much, much harder when you don't know who's going to show up. So you have to think about, do I know who's here? Do I know what they need? Luckily, we now have some AI. I'm embarrassed because I'm like, I should have turned on the captions. So yes, Rich, you do have to pair people based on projects rather than based on time zone rather than role, which can be really hard if your engineering team's in the Ukraine and your product management team is in Sunnyvale. So maybe one of your Sunnyvale people will have to go nocturnal. I do want to speak to that one more second because that's what some of the students have done. They've basically become the equivalent of night shift workers. And the downside of that is they're showing all the health problems that night shift workers have now that we've hit week 8. They've had horrible insomnia. They have dark circles in their eye. Some are losing weight, some are gaining weight. Being nocturnal is actually not a great idea for human beings. So figuring out how to navigate that is going to be so hard. But do be accessible. Be an experienced designer. That's one of the big surprises as I went, oh my God, I'm not a teacher, I'm an experienced designer. This is awesome. Instead of thinking of myself as someone who's going to talk at people, I actually try to create a learning experience that makes sense. Do your need finding, find out where people are, what they need, etc. Non-screen activities is my other favorite one, which is like, suggest people go and do something on a piece of paper and then take a photo and upload it. Like, be a pal, get people off the damn computer. I'm going to fly through Tools School because I think tools are tools. There's always another one. But I will say I have 3 networks in my house and I still struggle to stay online effectively. I love my document camera. I love my document camera so much. Right now I'm using it as a webcam hanging off my screen, but you can use them lots of different ways. The Blue Ice mic is awesome. Any mic that you would use for a podcast. But you know what? The wired headphones work pretty well. The earbuds are crap. The sound is horrible. Bluetooth messes up, but a good wired earbud is surprisingly great. So here's my setup. I'm trying to fix my ergonomics in my house because my back's going. But you can see there's the document camera hanging down, taking a picture of me, or I can point it at a piece of paper so people can watch me sketch. I left mouse because I'm right-handed and I destroyed my right hand in an early tech job. So do what you can with what you got on. This is built into an IKEA shelf and I have a condo, not a big house. So I guess my big lessons are all my assumptions were wrong and I hit one after another after another. And everybody's different. There's no such thing as average. So you just got to keep talking to them. I found this to be true with everybody. Like some people are bored out of their minds and desperately looking for something to do and really want to hang out on Zoom. And other people are on Zoom 8 hours a day. And if you ask them to come to your Zoom happy hour, they're going to burst into tears. So you just have to respect. And I think my last piece of advice is try to be low tech first. Start with text and then slowly layer on the high bandwidth things. It's really a more effective way to do things. And again, I guess it's the classic, be a good manager. If you have a team, it's so hard to do this alone. The more you spend on your team, the more you give them control. Don't try to do everything yourself. Everything gets better. Also, I've never solved the cat problem. I guess he's not a problem. Perhaps he's a feature. Okay, shall we answer a few questions? I wanted to try to leave some questions available, and I don't have a hard stop at 3. So I can go a little bit long since we started a little bit late.
Well, first I'm going to give you a little round of applause because I know that the audience can't do that, but they would be doing that if they could. And I want to start, yes, we have lots of questions. So someone had mentioned, I heard the don't teach alone, but realistically, universities I teach at remotely for 6 years now already pay me next to nothing to teach alone, and they would never pay for a second person to teach with me during my hours. Any advice if you do teach alone?
Yes. So if you have to teach alone, you don't have to be alone. So you can do things like have a student be the person to watch your back for you. You could have, if you can get a TA or if you can get a CA, it's really awesome. But you could have a different student each week help you out, and you could exchange for them some mentorship, because often students really desperately want some extra attention. So try to be creative. You may still have to do the bulk of the teaching, but just having someone to ask you questions is amazing, rather than having to pay attention to the chat at the same time you're trying to talk. That's miserable. You just, even a little bit of help can release the burden. And I think human beings love to help anyway. I think human beings are mostly essentially altruistic. Our current presidency, as a exception that proves the rule. Sorry, I should get political. Bad, Christina. But yeah, just look for the helpers and look for the helpers to be. I bet somebody's out there, and maybe it's just the students. Just the students. I learn everything from the students.
Awesome. Someone had asked, how do you, or any tips for facilitating groups with a mix of language fluency?
Oh, that is really, really hard. At Stanford, we've been good about getting everybody to be strong in English, but back at CCA, I have to admit that some people got through that perhaps shouldn't have gotten through. And what I've found helps a lot is try to come up with some ways to get buddies. So again, it's all about your need finding. Find out who's signing up for you, figure out what are their challenges going to be, and then come up with various solutions. And one can be buddies. I've been doing a lot recently with my classes of putting students who are a little more senior with students who are a little more junior. And that's a similar situation where if you can give them someone to pay attention to help them, that can really help a lot too. Probably try to speak more slowly. When I'm speaking in another country, I actually change the way I speak a lot. I try to hit my consonants. I try to speak more slowly. It can help for translation. It can help a lot with subtitles.
Great. And on that note too, you mentioned, participants helping one another, students helping one another. Abla had asked, how do you encourage sharing, having people share concepts or pair up when they don't know each other? How do you develop trust to encourage students to share?
Oh, that could be a book. I mean, psychological safety is totally a thing. I recommend looking up Amy Edmondson and the Fearless Organization, because one of the first things you have to do is establish this is going to be a safe place. And you can't say it. Nobody will buy it unless they believe it. So there are things I can do by being very vulnerable, by being very comfortable, being wrong, by, like, if I have a whiteboard, I'll misspell things. I don't even have to try because I have dyslexia. So you have to be comfortable making a mistake and recovering. And then if somebody else makes a mistake, it's really important to help them recover. And it's like, oh, no big deal. If somebody says, I have a dumb question, you're like, nah, you can say there's no dumb questions, but you have to treat it really as if it's a valuable question. The more you signal it. So I think with students, it's really good to put them into a breakout room early with a question that they can easily answer if you have the time. And that way they can get to know each other a little bit and they start to be able to have those conversations. Open-ended questions are awesome. Everybody, opinions are like elbows. Everybody has a couple, so put them in a room together so they can bump elbows.
Great. Lynn had asked, she wants to know a bit more about exit tickets. So you talked about this in the beginning, but tactically, what is the format that they come in? What do they look like? How do they work?
Okay, so the most basic exit ticket, and once you start Googling this, you're gonna go down that rabbit hole, but the one I found super useful is just 3 questions. So every single week, we ask our students, what was the most valuable thing this week, right? What are you still confused by? And what is something we should know? And it's that last one, what is something that we should know, is where we end up with all the crazy stuff. That's where we get to find out about the time zone, or the fact that somebody is trying to learn in a one-room house, you know, things like that we've gotten from our exit tickets. And they're anonymous, and that's huge. So there's two forms of feedback. There's the anonymous exit ticket, and then there's the office hours. And all my students have different, all my course assistants have different office hours open. And then I have You Can Book Me, which anybody can book. And between that, somebody's always available for somebody.
Great. Jennifer had asked that, so her employer asks that all students keep a discussion with instructors on Slack, but they still use chat. I'm assuming that means like on Zoom or when they're live. The fun stuff happens there and the serious convos happen in Slack. And do you have any suggestions for bringing those worlds together in the actual classroom? This rule wasn't needed.
I think that the reality is that there's probably a reason fun stuff is happening in chat, and maybe it's because it's almost impossible to save. And at Stanford, you can't save chat. So it's ephemeral, which is a little like Snapchat, where you have that safety of knowing it's going to go away. Switching channels is annoying and hard, and you feel like you lose something when you close one window and open another window. Your employer can say anything they want, but I don't think you can force people to do anything. You can consider things like what I just said, which is we're going to read through the chat. We can't actually get our chat, thank goodness, because this is Danielle's webinar, not Stanford's. But we can go through and say, okay, we're going to go through chat. We're going to pull out everything, and we're going to get it back to you in a week. And that can be a way to, and then you can post it in Slack. But yeah, I think humans, they aren't sheep. You can't hurt them. So you got to ask yourself more, why do you think they want to do this, and how do I support it? And is there a way to make them do something my employer wants? But if not, humans, man, what are you gonna do?
Jenny asked, is there anything that you had to do differently for group projects in your Stanford class, if you had any group projects?
Oh my God. Redundancy is for everything, even group size. So if I would normally have a 3-person team, I'd have to have a 4-person team because somebody would disappear. And people disappear not because they're maliciously ghosting. That's been a huge problem, is a lot of the other instructors go, oh, they ghosted, students are lazy, blah, blah, blah. But when we dig in, we find out very quickly that students are going through a lot of stuff, really. And so redundancy in the team, so slightly bigger teams. A 3-person team becomes a 4-person team, 4-person team becomes a 5 or 6-person team. And then you have to think, okay, how do I design the project so that it can be broken up? So a couple people can take this part and a couple people can take that part. We also do team feedback surveys. We send out a quick one asking who was particularly valuable, who do you feel didn't pull their weight. We do it midpoint and we do it at the end. And we use that to, historically we've used it to inform grades, but this quarter we've used it to inform check-ins with people. When we find out that somebody's disappeared and then we look at their assignments and realize they've been missing a lot of assignments, then we reach out and we say, we're really worried about you. And students have been really good about responding to that.
Great. Paulina asked if you have any recommendations of what you use to record your videos as training material. So I know that you mentioned you don't do live lectures all the time. And so what do you use to record?
Honestly, I hate recording lectures. I'm a perfectionist. I used Explain Anything, which was really nice for me because it's an iPad tool. I can use the pencil on it. I'm pretty decent with a pencil on an iPad. But I kept re-recording things because I found myself being an amazing perfectionist, and it's terrible. And so it's just so much easier for me to like give a lecture at the beginning of, like I said, I did these 3 Zooms. So I'll give a lecture at the beginning and then they can replay the recording, or I'll just show up all 3 times, but only for part of the section, like the 10 minutes where I'm going to give some talking. But I just friggin' hate it. If I have the opportunity to edit things, I will get lost in editing. I have used Camtasia, Snagit, also to record lectures as well. So I have done some of it, but it's really not for me.
Great. And then Adrian asked if you have any tips for dealing with jerks. They found it quite hard to manage folks being annoying to other students or inside channels. And how do you manage that student that maybe is annoying everyone else?
You know, I rarely have to deal with this, which is really amazing. And I feel very lucky, or maybe it's because of the psychological safety thing. But creating norms at the beginning allows me to say, this is how we're going to enforce them. So when I start off a class, I try to at least set aside some of the time. With 1 hour, I can't do it, but with multiple hours, we can at least spend a little bit of time coming up with the norms and then asking each other, how are we going to enforce this? So students will come up with things that they really think are important, like maybe not interrupting, or, you know, seek first to understand, then be understood. And after that, I'll say, well, what does that look like? So we have something concrete to react to. And then how are we going to mutually reinforce it? I will be the bad guy if I need to, but it's better if everybody is enforcing the norms. And if the asshat thinks everybody's enforcing the norms, doesn't hurt either. So that can make a big, big difference. But I will say, I have learned how to mute people. I know how to kick people out of the meetings. It's actually literally easier to manage people on Zoom than it is in a classroom, where unfortunately I have to like kind of wait to the break, then walk outside and say, I just want to talk to you a little bit about that interaction. Let's talk about how it might be perceived. Let's talk about the effect it has with people. It's such a joy to just go, I will get after you later, but right now I get to remove you from the equation. But like I said, I try to avoid it rather than enforce it if I can.
Great, thank you. Well, I think we got to most of our questions. I want to say, again, thank you so much, Christina. I saw lots of cheers in the chat earlier as people had to hop off a bit early. So again, you have so much great advice and wisdom, and we appreciate you sharing your experiences. So thanks so much. And thank you to all of you for joining in. We really appreciate it. Again, there's going to be a feedback survey. We'd love to hear from you, and that we hope that you'll stay engaged with Women Talk Design as well. Speaking of trainings, if your organization is looking for ways to connect team members, even while remote, Women Talk Design offers public speaking trainings, and we've moved them all remote with a lot of Christina's great advice and expertise. So thanks again, everyone. We'll follow up.
Thank you.
Oh, and yes, Stephanie, get to bed.